Hi, I'm Raj. Welcome to Whisky Tasting with the Whisky Angels. Normally we'd all be together in a tent in Fergus, but this year we thought it would be fun to do a small virtual tasting at home just to help you remember how to enjoy a dram on your own time. So my name is Raj, and I run the Whisky Angels Whiskey Club in Toronto and actually across the country. I started the club, the Whisky Angels Club, as an opportunity to introduce whiskey to communities and groups that weren't necessarily always exposed to the glorious world of whiskey. Today, I'm just going to introduce you to the kind of basics of enjoying a dram at home. We all might have different bottles at home, and some of you might not even have one, but at least when you do go to the store to pick up a bottle next time, you'll have at least the basics to go to. When you're tasting whiskey, there's no right way and there's no wrong way. Everyone will tell you that there is a way, but really it comes down to exploring and learning about yourself and about the dram that you're drinking. So, you know, a big part of taste for everyone is nosing and smelling what it is that you're about to eat. So eat or drink. And so with whiskey specifically, a big part of it is nosing the dram. And the only way you can actually smell something and identify what it is that you're smelling is if you've smelt that thing before. If you had never smelt nutmeg before and someone handed you this brown nut and crushed it up and said, "What is this?" you wouldn't know what it is. You wouldn't know what to call it. So, you know, when you're nosing whiskey, you're smelling something and you're like, one person could pick this glass up and say, "Oh my gosh, I get all these notes of nutmeg." You would never know to identify that if you've never smelt nutmeg before. Just really spending more of your life kind of exploring and understanding what it is that you're smelling will help you, if your dream is to identify smells in your whiskey. But really, it's about enjoying it, in my opinion. So grab your glasses and just take a few minutes and just smell it and see what kinds of smells over time kind of come to you that you can identify. It truly is such a personal experience what everybody brings to the table, no matter what. If you're all drinking the same dram or a different dram, you might have a story. Let's stick with the nutmeg story that we've started. If you've got some reminiscent story of your, you know, some family baking that you've had that had nutmeg in it, or cooking or whatever, and that's so ingrained in you and you're so connected to that nutmeg, then, you know, that to me is the thing that whiskey does for people. It helps bring you together in that experience. It gives you a story to tell while you're all sharing that dram, talking about grandma's nutmeg muffins or whatever she made with the nutmeg. But if you smell something different, share it. Share the story that's connected to it. And I feel like that's a good opportunity, now that you've all hopefully poured a dram at home, to take a break. And if you don't have a dram, pour yourself a dram, and let's nose our whiskey. Give it a little swirl, really get your nose in there, and just enjoy and talk about it. And then let's come back together in a few minutes. Okay, so let's all take a few minutes to nose our whiskey and have a little chat with your friends about it. And I'll see you in a few minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed having a little nose of your whiskey. The next step is to actually taste your whiskey. So first things first, just take a tiny little sip of your whiskey. Really let it roll around in your mouth, coat your tongue. Just You know, if you're having a very high proof single malt whiskey, that might be a lot for your mouth to just be like, whoa, what have you just done, you know? So if you take a small sip, that's just giving your mouth and your palate an opportunity to get ready for what's to come. And, you know, you'll get a sense of, you know, the feel in your mouth and whether or not that whiskey is high proof or not. And that's your chance to kind of be like, well, you know, I might want to add a drop or two of water to this whiskey just to kind of open it up and lighten it a little bit. So then the next sip for you is a little bit more, and a lot of people, there's a million different ways to taste your whiskey. Some people like to chew their whiskey, so take a small sip and pretend it's something solid in your mouth and chew it, and I'll do it with you just so you don't feel silly. What that does is it introduces a lot of saliva into your mouth, and it mixes with the whiskey, and it really, really opens it up. I found that last taste to be quite alcohol-y and intense as I chewed it. That's okay. All that's doing is it's introducing your mouth and your palate to all the different flavors that might be in there. And I encourage you to talk about what you taste or don't taste as you do that. Now, what you'll find on your third sip is that your mouth and your palate are very much more prepared for the flavors that are within that whiskey. So let's take a third sip. I just encourage you all to just take your time and really slowly enjoy and appreciate your whiskey. You'll find that it changes even over the course of your dram, as well as over the course of your night. So make sure you save all those peated whiskeys for the end of the night. So a lot of people ask me, or I shouldn't say necessarily ask me, but are sometimes confused by what whiskey is versus Scotch. What's the difference? Are they the same thing? What if I spell whiskey with an E or without an E? What's the difference? Really, at the end of the day, whiskey is, the best way that I've found to describe it is that whiskey is a tree. And on that tree there are many, many branches. All kinds of different grains are used, different processes are used, different countries have different rules about what qualifies as a whiskey from that country versus another country. So whiskey, let's just start with the E and the no E. The E comes from Ireland. So the Irish, from whenever they began writing the word whiskey, using the letters we use today, spelt it with an E, and the rest of, and Scotland, where dare we say whiskey originated, spelt it without an E. And it comes from a Gaelic word, uskava. And anyways, long story short, we all ended up with this English language, and the Scottish spelt it without an E, and the Irish spelt it with an E. And the spelling of the word traveled around the world. And the United States had a fair amount of Irish immigration, and that's where the spelling of the whiskey with an E remained that way. And in Canada and most of the rest of the world, actually, whiskey is formally spelt without an E. Now back to this tree. The branches of the tree of whiskey resulted from this same expansion around the world. So Scottish whiskey has, or Scotch, single malt Scotch specifically, has certain parameters that it needs to meet to be called Scotch. It needs to have been, the barley needs to come from Scotland. It needs to have been distilled in Scotland, and it needs to have aged in a cask in Scotland for 3 years plus a day. That's kind of what makes Scotch Scotch. And I should say single malt Scotch specifically only has one grain and one distillery. Bourbon in the States is just another form of whiskey. Bourbon primarily has corn as its main grain. These days, rye is an increasingly popular grain to use, but rye, corn, barley, Those are the main 3 grains that are used around the world, and in other countries, all sorts of other grains are used. So you'll find amazing whiskey coming out of Taiwan and Japan and India and Canada and the States. And I encourage all of you to take some time to explore those different types of whiskey from around the world. Do some tastings with some friends. Reach out to me. I'll happily help you plan one. And just take the time to explore the different grains and how different whiskey can be, even though the process is almost the same. So one of the things I want to share with all of you that I think is important to remember as you begin or continue your exploration into the world of whiskey, wherever it happens to be from, is that at the end of the day, everybody's right and nobody's right. This really is your personal journey as much as it is anybody else's. And, I really do hope to see as many of you as can possibly be in Fergus next year to enjoy a tasting in person. We'll go through a lot more detail when we're together, talking about the whole process of whiskey production, and hopefully learn about some specific bottles and distilleries. And I'll share some stories of my travels to Scotland, as well as, hopefully have some special guests and friends join us for some tastings in real life next year.